Hello, and welcome to this installment of the Future Grind podcast. I'm your host, Ryan O'Shea, and today I'll be speaking with Nick Davis, the Faculty Chair for Corporate Innovation at Singularity University. Nick helps organizations identify and capitalize on the exponential trends that will impact their industry and the world. He's just authored a new book titled Future Ready, a Changemaker's Guide to the Exponential Revolution, which is described as a resource for developing skill sets for future success. Nick is also a venture partner at Bold Capital, which invests in high-growth startups that leverage exponential technologies, and serves as the Chief Platform Officer for the Mid-Ohio Foodbank. We discuss what it means to be future-ready, the importance of mindset, the impact of the coronavirus pandemic, and much more. And in case you missed it during our last episode, we plan to send an episode of the Future Grind podcast to the moon on board Astrobotic's first lunar mission. We plan to send the file on a micro SD card, and we wanted to provide you, the Future Grind audience, an opportunity to fly alongside us by sending your own digital files and photos to the moon. As an individual, this is your opportunity to create a digital time capsule with your story, your family history, and your photos. As a writer, artist, musician, or filmmaker, this is your opportunity to have your work in space. As a company or organization, this is your opportunity to make a splash by sending your logo, business info, or digital product to the lunar surface. All it takes is a $20 donation. To find out more and get involved, visit futuregrind.org/moon. That's futuregrind.org/moon. As always, show notes and links are available at futuregrind.org. We're on iTunes, Stitcher, and wherever podcasts are found. A video version of this episode is posted on Facebook and YouTube. Make sure to subscribe on all of these platforms, leave a review, and you can also like, comment, and share to spread the word. If you'd like to keep this podcast running, you can donate at futuregrind.org/support, or you can purchase some of our newly released products at futuregrind.org/store. Because of you, this is Future Grind. All right, and now we're here with Nick. Nick, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
So you are the Faculty Chair for Corporate Innovation at Singularity University, and your new book, Future Ready, a Changemaker's Guide to the Exponential Revolution, focuses on similar topics. So what is it that you do, and what's the goal?
My focus is really helping large organizations, both for-profit and nonprofit, look at technology's impact to their current state and future state business. Even the majority of the work that I've done over the years, and certainly Singularity and Reaching the Future Faster, which is our consulting firm do now, is really looking at the future for large global brands and thinking through everything from, like I said, exponential technologies to world conditions to different aspects of their business strategy that might be impacted by changing conditions. And helping get more prepared for it. And so, the stories, the case studies, the things that we focused on in the book are really around, how people can leverage our framework and our models to be able to think about how they navigate that unknown future more successfully and ultimately build future-ready leaders who are adept at making their way there a little bit faster.
So before we get too far into the content of the book and your work, I'd like to find out a bit more about you. What's your background, and how did you get into the world of innovation?
Like most innovation leaders, it's a fun, not planned journey, if you will. I spent the earlier years of my career, I was actually in the military, so I did military intelligence for a while. Grad school was at UCLA. I actually also went and worked there for 5 years. And so the earlier part of my career really was around executive education. So, helping, executives, look at their own career, look at the different, business implications of anything from, leadership to finance to, board management, mergers and acquisitions, leadership, things like that. But, I had 23 different programs that I oversaw, including one of them around creativity and innovation. And then from there, met a woman named Mitra Best, who recently been promoted up into the Chief Innovation Officer role at PricewaterhouseCoopers. And she recruited me over. So it was certainly one of those leaps of faith where you leave academia and, in a major university and, move over into professional consulting. and you kind of learn as you go. And so that first 2 or 3 years that I was there, it was kind of a boot camp, if you will, and how companies take products to market. How do we think about building more innovative and creative talent? I oversaw a lot of our entrepreneurial programs out in the ecosystem. So I helped run the Los Angeles Mayor's Council of Innovation and Industry. Worked with the governor of Colorado on some innovation network building there in the state. And so a lot of it was really this combination of startups, venture capital, and corporate innovation. And so that became kind of the cornerstone of my career, if you will. And so from there, I moved on to starting a startup. It got acquired pretty quick, and that kind of moved me into the entrepreneurship venture space. I'm still a venture partner at Bold Capital in LA today, which is a large VC fund. And then finally on to Singularity, where we've worked with hundreds of the world's largest organizations. It's been kind of one step to the other, military to executive development to entrepreneurship and innovation, ultimately landing at this place where, constantly looking at, the future, the technology and innovation overall.
So in episode 40 of this podcast, I spoke with Adam Hoffman of Singularity University, and we explored what the organization is all about and what happens there. So for anyone looking for a deep dive into Singularity itself, I'd recommend that episode. But for you, Nick, your work at Singularity University is focused on corporate innovation. What types of programs, services, and events do you provide there, and who participates?
Yes, I mean, my role in academics for SU is really around, how we think about, obviously, helping our clients help the world think about, what does innovation mean for them? What are the models, frameworks, and different means that they can use to get themselves successful? Singularity is like most educational institutions is going through a little bit of a resurgence right now, given the current COVID crisis and so on. So a lot of the things that they're doing are moving to digital, like many of the universities that are out there. But what you can really think of is managing the process and methodology of innovation is certainly remaining a focus, for the work that I do, for the work that Singularity does. And that's going to be, no matter what delivery modality of learning, whether it be digital or in-person programs, that's always going to be a core case, right? We need, as human beings, to give ourselves frameworks for how to think about planning forward and operating and managing our way to the future. It's not just let's hope and pray that we get there and let's just keep doing this business as usual. So Singularity's got obviously open enrollment programs that you can go and take online to be able to look at things like that. Our consulting firm that I use to launch the book. So like I said, reaching the future faster. Ultimately we're able to do open enrollment or custom programs for organizations who want to learn about best ways to innovate. And we do a lot of research work as well. And so, for us, it's a lot of what is the impact of machine learning and deep learning on our business? And how can we build new and better products leveraging these technologies? How can we think about the competitive landscape changing as we think about, these technologies converging, coming online all at the same time? That way we can get a better view that the kind of fog is lifted, if you will, on the fast approaching future. Then it makes it easier for our clients to navigate their way there.
Are you able to give us some examples or case studies of companies that have worked with Singularity University and what initiatives came out of that work? Are there any favorite stories you have from this?
Yeah, I mean, we break most of our work down into kind of four categorical areas. So, from a structural standpoint, you can kind of think of it like this. We talk a lot about a future vision that is accounting for and leveraging exponential technology. So, visioning and kind of a future roadmap, and we do a lot of that work with our clients. From there, we talk about, 10xing your innovation. So really when it comes to the category of corporate innovation, specifically, how are you putting a process and methodology and tools in place in order for you to build with and on top of exponential tech? Speed is a big component of that one, and we can talk about some of the stories for that one. From there, we want to be able to think about how we actually talk to, develop, and build capable leaders. So 10x leaders are what we say at Singularity and in the book. And ultimately, then how do we think about an exponential or 10x culture? How do we build the environment for people to be able to actually do the work necessary to speed up and get themselves to the future? So strategy, innovation, leadership, and culture. In any one of those categories, we've got, obviously, fun client stories. Most of them prefer if we don't throw their brand around. So I can give you a couple, of examples of fun stories that I'll say, large company in this particular area. One that kind of comes to mind that I'll talk about often, and I talk about it in the book, is there's a large global insurance organization that came to us about a year and a half ago, and they were looking at, it's the CTO, CIO, and the entire kind of technology leadership team that came out to campus to work with us. And, the faculty member on stage was talking about quantum computing, right? And so, what is it? How fast will it come? What's the impact to our business? How should we think about it strategically? And the question of robo-advisors came up. Right. So how long until you call into one of their call centers and one of their, financial advisors who's giving you advice on insurance or your portfolio or whatever is not a human, right? It's a robot AI that's, giving this, at least, introductory advice, and you can't distinguish between the human and the robot. So that idea comes up in the room, right? And, we go around the room and we ask the question, right? How long do you think it's going to be before this happens? Of course, the CTO says, like 5 years, the CIO says, maybe 3 to 4. Everyone in the room from their executive team that basically guessed different years. And of course, I kind of turned the question on our faculty member and said, what do you think? And of course, they're an expert in the field, 2 years ago, right? You're already a little bit late. And so it really starts to bring to light for us, I think, one of the current things that we're seeing in the market, which is, it used to be a question of will AI come? Will 3D print come? Will drones come? Will these technologies come online? That's not the question anymore, right? No client shows up to the work that I do and do I find them saying, I don't believe that these technologies are going to have an impact, right? I think that day has passed. The question is now when, right? And getting a group consensus on when these technologies will actually impact, an organization and how is extremely critical for their success. Because you can imagine if you've got, a core leadership group of 12 individuals who are trying to decide when and how to take action or leverage these tools. And if they don't agree on when to take action or when impact will happen, they're ultimately reacting at different timelines, right? One may be, pushing us forward as fast as possible with urgency, a burning platform. Another may not believe it's going to happen for some time, so they're being kind of the stick in the mud. They're not moving as they should. And what that creates is an environment that just slows everything to a halt, right? Or at least makes it really difficult to make, concerted progress in the speed that's necessary. And so, especially in that visioning piece, that future planning piece, and a lot of the work that we do is really about helping people, first understand just how quickly this is all going to happen. And the second is, start to really think about how much faster they need to react to things in order to be on the appropriate timeline, right? So these things don't just come out of nowhere and hit them. And so that for me is a fun story, right? They really had to have a hard conversation on, is this something that's going to happen faster? Do we need to start investing now? Can we wait a little bit and, kind of take that wait and see strategy and let others do some of the initial investing, and then we'll jump in at the end. I think those are the hard conversations that executives need to be having at that level. And it certainly is ones where we help them do that. I think a couple other ones, from an innovation standpoint, we certainly have had some clients where they came to us to build new fun things with the tools. We've built everything from new AR, VR training tools for a major global airline who really wanted to actually look at how they could help their people through onboarding understand the physics of flight, even if they weren't a pilot or a flight engineer. And it was fun, right? You go from that kind of 2D manual where you're getting onboarded with this new company, and it's like, I get it, the planes fly or whatever. But if you're in HR or finance or whatever, and you've got no formal training in engineering, it's not as cool to just sit and kind of read it. But we built a dynamic tool where they could kind of put the VR goggles on. It was in this case the HoloLens, and the planes are flying around them in real time as they start to understand some of the history and dynamics of their company. So. Depending on what the clients want to focus on, we certainly have had capability around both building real product as well as kind of helping them with their future focused strategy.
So I can definitely see the benefits of the in-person workshops and the consulting that you do at Singularity University. But now let's move into the book, which is described in the introduction as a resource for developing skill sets for future success. Why did you decide to write it? What do you cover in it? And who is the intended audience?
You're absolutely right. It was certainly intended for both the organization and the individual. What we're basically covering is the main framework that we've used with, like I said, hundreds of clients over the years. We've adapted it to be more condensed in this particular framework, obviously for the book itself. But it's really showcasing a lot of that work. We've seen our clients coming to us and working their way through this in some pretty difficult times and really trying to, kind of keep themselves relevant in their particular industries. And we've tried to, bring that all into one comprehensive framework and stories that they can use as kind of a how-to guide to navigate their way through that uncertain future for both themselves and their company. And so, for anyone who's really focused on, how do I think about, building a future-ready organization is ultimately applicable for. So, managers and leaders who are responsible for growth, or anyone who's trying to think about how do I develop these future leaders. We do spend a lot of time talking about enabling different mindsets and really speaking about the future of leadership, and how we're all going to have to work a little bit different. I think obviously the current state of things in the world have accelerated a lot of that. I think we're getting a glimpse of just what this digital connected world means when we're all zooming in from all locations all the time. I think this new normal is going to set in, and it certainly has opened our eyes for different ways to work and what that all means for us.
Yeah, you brought up the coronavirus pandemic there, and I'm going to want to talk a bit more about how that is affecting the future of work and industries and how that's going to change. But first, you mentioned mindsets there. And if I had to choose a single thing that was my takeaway from your book, it would be the importance of mindsets and the idea that innovation is more driven by people than it is by technologies. So I'd like to explore this a bit further. Why are mindsets so important? And how would you describe the right mindset for someone to be in?
Yeah, I mean, we did a poll last year heading into our global summit that I thought the results were really interesting for around, just to your point, the huge focus of mindsets. Basically, we went out to a bunch of innovation executives and said, what is the most important thing do you believe for someone to innovate correctly? Is it the tools, is it the frameworks, or is it the mindset? And as you might imagine, the punchline was the vast majority believed it was people, right? It's the people that end up being the ones who are so important for this all to happen in the right way. And so what we've done basically in the way that we talk about it at SU is there's kind of this wave framework basically, and so, the way that we try and build the mental picture for people to understand it is, you have to be both the surfer and the wave. The wave being, how do we think about, the driving the momentum of change, of opportunity, of riding that wave of disruption even. Can we create that wave ourselves? I mean, example that's probably the most typically used is like your Elon Musk, right? Like you're really looking at energy production or automotive or the different areas that he's focused on, space travel, whatever. And he is building that future, right? He is looking to really disrupt very old industries with a new approach. He's building that wave of change, but also being the surfer of it, right? How do you get out of there and understand the skills that are necessary to ride that wave of opportunity, to ride that change that you are eliciting, in your job, in your market, in your industry, whatever it may be. And so for us, it's really that combination of the two. How can you get that 360-degree future mindset in today's reality is a huge piece of it. We talk a lot about being adaptable, right? How do you unlearn and relearn and challenge legacy behaviors and so on? A lot of that type of different thinking is what we tell our leaders they need to bring to the table and ultimately keep themselves successful as the future goes on. So the short punchline, be the wave of disruption and obviously be the surfer who rides it for the greatest opportunity.
And in your book, you bring up the famous example of Kodak. They were pioneers in digital photography and were well positioned to bring this to market, but rather than promoting this disruptive technology, they tried to bury it and keep their existing business model intact, and that ended up failing. And it seems that this is an example of a company that was more concerned about being disrupted than they were about disrupting. And I see this happening today as well, often with larger companies buying smaller competitors, and rather than implementing that new technology into their systems, they shelve it and continue their old ways. How can companies break out of this harmful cycle and embrace change?
It's hard, right? We all get addicted to the thing that's kind of making us successful at the time, and we tend to kind of go heads down and stop focusing on what's going to make us, successful in the future. It's that changing mindset, right? I mean, I like I just said, unlearning and relearning new ways to behave and operate are mission critical for these companies. You really have to take the opportunity to say the wave of disruption is coming. We have to have an eye towards the future. We have to understand that no cycle anymore is going to last forever, and we have to be constantly working on what is our next thing that's going to become our new core, and not be afraid to disrupt the old one. People are feeling the impact of Amazon moving so quickly all the time into markets and not being afraid to disrupt their old thing for the new thing. So I think people are seeing it. I mean, it's, I would not call it absolute common knowledge among executives, but it's for the most part there and getting there. I think it really comes down to, again, aligning people on where to go, right? Like letting go of that, handlebar when you can't quite see the next handlebar. It's scary. You don't know if it's going to work. And I'm happy to let go of the old thing, but are you sure the new thing's going to win, right? Are we sure it will get us there? And so I think I see a lot more of that these days where, in general, people understand they've got to adapt, they've got to move quickly, but like, where? How do we agree on where we're going to move? How do we get alignment on it so we're all marching in the same direction? That to me is a lot of that large organizational inertia that seems to cause companies problems when they don't have a very visionary CEO like a Bezos or Jobs or any of those that are like hardcore, this is where we're going and that's the direction, very visionary leader. Other ones that don't have that, I think, get stuck.
Yeah, I think one of the things that holds many companies back is just the fact that change is so difficult to implement in many cases, even when the change is extremely positive. So many organizations struggle with that and have whole change management systems to make that work. Do you have any thoughts on how to appropriately implement change in a system, and do you have any systems that you typically follow or suggest?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I think you kind of have to line things up in a way that is very thoughtful. You really have to show people why you're going to take them to this new place, right? If you expect people to change, they've got to understand, be passionate about, be excited about where they're going. Otherwise, they're not going to care, right? They're going to come to work, keep collecting paychecks, and fight all they can to not have to turn their brain on and start doing things differently than they've always done. But at the same time, you have to give people an actual plan that's going to get you there, right? You can't build this great vision of what the 20-year roadmap looks like and then ultimately say, we're going to change our whole industry. We're going to, move from building cars to building smart cities. And then ultimately build this grand vision, but then tell people, I'm not sure what your role is going to be in that future or how to get there, but just trust me and come along. That chaotic, just searching for what they're hoping to be in the future, I think people see and feel that. It causes anxiety. People don't know which way they should be running. And ultimately, you see organizations, I think, quite often fail from that. It's just a lack of really honing in a tight vision of where they're trying to go. I remember an airline that we were working with, a few years ago, where their CEO basically charged us with creating this vision of what the next 25 years of the future of flight looks like from their customers' perspective. And they wanted us to present it out to them and their board, and then ultimately share the assets with their stakeholders and their customers and so on. And it was an interesting exercise because they were thoughtful enough to say, break the current models. Like, we may be in these 3 or 4 different industries in the aviation areas right now. Pretend that it doesn't matter if we're in them. If we are later, great. If we're not, so what? But really start to build out some experiences to show what that future customer would look like before flight, during flight, and after flight with us. And really expand that brand. And what we worked towards was this vision of 15, 20 years from now that was still core to who they are, right? They were building wonderful aircraft and really servicing the transportation world. But it really was a different vision, like how they were going to operate a little bit differently. But they were thoughtful enough to then go back and say, okay, now that we know what that future looks like, what we aspire to, right? We can't predict it, but this is who we want the future to be, and we're going to really lean into creating it. They went back and started to create roadmaps for all of their technology, their innovation and infrastructure, their teams, how they're training people. They were extremely engaged in, if that's who we want to be, let's get everyone prepared for it, and let's align everyone around it, and let's all sprint as fast as we can to make that future come true. I think those are things where you really start to see organizations shine. I know in the press that I've seen for them in the last year or so, it's working, right? I mean, it's hard work, but it's working, and you can definitely tell, as an organization, they're shifting towards it and really becoming, who they aspire to be. And I think it's that strong vision and strong execution plan put together that really allows them to do that successfully.
When I look to the future, one thing that stands out to me is the importance of combinatorial innovation, meaning that while innovating within a particular domain or industry is great, there seems to be an added potential for cross-pollination and collaboration between specialties. Broad examples could be combining biology with robotics, or artificial intelligence with consumer electronics, or virtual reality with real estate. How do you view combinatorial innovation, and how should individuals or companies approach it?
Yeah, I totally agree with you. It's a huge piece of it. I mean, I don't think that any of these technologies anymore are going to live in silos. And that includes specializations, research specializations at major universities that have typically been siloed for years. I think we're really starting to live in, more and more every day an interconnected world. And that includes, obviously the technology areas of focus or innovation focus areas that we're all doing research or work in. Yeah, there's that old saying, right? The best ideas live outside your company. The best ideas ultimately live outside your specialization too. There's dozens and dozens of examples of open innovation competitions where people put out a hard question that their internal engineers who are quote unquote world leading experts in that field haven't been able to solve, and then ultimately when they open it up to the general public, if someone in a random field not even trained in that thought of it differently, found an idea that worked better, and ultimately solved the solution. It's how we operate, right? And I think that it's going to be really interesting how fast that amplification happens as we start to see, the AI combined with the autonomy and IoT sensors, combined with the 5G networks, combined with pharma and healthcare. You start to see these things all converging and coming together. They're all kind of coming around the same time. And what's interesting is they're going to really start to accelerate each other. I think we're starting to see use cases of that now in the current crisis where we're getting things through approvals faster. We're running deep learning models against things that can help with the virus. There's a lot going on in the world right now whenever we bring these different specializations together for common good that are really, really exciting. But it's also impactful or it could be disruptive to a business if they're not accounting for it. We've got a lot of healthcare partners that we've worked with over the years. And I'm constantly kind of, not warning them, but kind of warning them that, the things that we're doing in CRISPR and genome editing and some of the things that we're doing around disease eradication or even as far out as longevity. Will someone have to be, getting diabetes at some point in their life? Will someone, once we cure a certain disease or, completely alleviate certain types of cancer, if they're making a drug that's just meant to treat that right now, that whole market goes away, right? How quickly will that happen? There's certain, opinions on that. Will it happen? Yeah. I mean, if we keep going the way that we're going from a technological standpoint, the AI and the different things that we're building right now, they are going to be able to solve a lot of these huge issues that we've been dealing with for many years. And that's going to bring us to a new future. It's going to have societal impacts. It's going to have health impacts. We're going to have to see these different things come together and leverage the power of all those technologies so we get the positive impact that we're hoping to.
And when it comes to startups that Singularity University works with, I think that many, if not all of them, have social good built into their business models, and their success by definition leads to a positive impact on the world. For other companies with perhaps older business models, this social good component often isn't as obvious. Where does corporate social responsibility fit into the equation for you, and how do you guide companies through thinking about this?
Obviously, it's a core mission of the work that Singularity does and has since the beginning. I mean, the Benefits Corporation and our global grand challenges are a huge focus of that. For me, I think we've reached the point in time where, quite frankly, it should be, if it's not already, a given that companies are worried about, both the bottom line as well as their global impact. And, I think probably 5 years ago, certainly 10 years ago, it was probably one of those things where the foundation was focused on it, or maybe there was a team, but if we can do good while we make money, we'll try to, but, if we don't, sorry. Anymore, most organizations are trying to find a way to leverage the technology to be able to ensure that they are having a global impact in a positive way. I think we're seeing it around the world in energy and other sectors where we really can do the right thing for the planet. And it really is also, because of the technology breakthroughs, the right thing for us to do overall. I think we're seeing that a lot in food, both how we make the meat, how we distribute food, around the world. You see a lot of different areas where people for years were entrenched in probably some things that were just not great for the planet, but they had to do it to make their businesses run. We're seeing that less and less. And I think you see more situations these days where there's almost a shaming that goes on, that when someone is kind of quote unquote outed as doing some really bad things for the environment, or countries that allow it to happen, that's not great. Their customers will stop buying that product. And I can think of some of the, the ride sharing apps where, ones were showing some really great philanthropic social work. Others were getting a lot of heat for not doing a lot of it. All of a sudden, you start seeing a lot of the swell of customers go to one app versus the other just because of that. You see those things happening in the market. The market is telling us, we care about this now. You must do it with us, or else you'll lose your customer base. So I think companies are taking it a lot more seriously.
I totally agree with that. I think the market is driving a lot of this work when it comes to corporate social responsibility, and a lot of new entrepreneurs and businesses are taking that into account and putting it in their business models from the beginning, which is great to see. And I mentioned that Singularity University is associated with a number of startups, and these startups are innovative and agile, the exact qualities that the larger corporations that you work with are looking for. And the larger corporations often have the resources that the startups need. Do you facilitate connections between the startups and the corporations that you work with, or how do you approach that?
Yeah. I mean, obviously, any good, kind of venture company who supports startups is certainly wanting to get a connection into larger markets or larger organizations. And Singularity is no different. So ultimately, yes, absolutely. We are always trying to help our corporate clients find the best technologies, the best talent, the best partners to work with. And in the innovation space, if you can buy it, it's faster than building it, which in most cases is true, right? And so to your earlier point, that doesn't mean you buy it and you kill it and you put it on a shelf. That means you buy it and you use it to amplify your business in some new and dynamic ways. But partnerships between corporations and startups are certainly a huge driver of market growth and certainly a big piece of the success of startups overall. There's a lot of examples these days of corporate sponsored accelerators. There's a lot of different venture funding arms for corporations. I mean, that's become fairly standard practice. Those teams who are focused on innovation or venturing or new product development started to formulate partnerships with the correct accelerators and incubators for their industry. So it is certainly a best practice, and a huge piece of that should be the fact that you're monitoring the startup landscape. You're understanding where venture trends are going, so you can see the market a little bit further out. You need to be seeing that. You need to be reacting to it. You need to be investing in those companies or buying them to expand into capabilities. And the big ones certainly are doing that. When it comes to mind for that I worked with them some years ago was MasterCard. I mean, they do an amazing job of running great pilots where they may not give the startup money specifically, but they give them access to their portal and their customer base in order to be able to prototype and build new products on top of and reach their customers, millions of customers. There's great stories like that where the startup can really get a lot further along and leverage the size and capability of the company while the company gets the nimble new technology and new startup team that goes in great waves.
So we're recording this in April of 2020 in the midst of the global COVID-19 pandemic. And our lifestyles today are completely different than they were just 2 months ago, and the world we move into will never quite be the same as the one it was before. Of course, there's a lot of illness and death and financial hardships, but challenges often provide opportunities for positive solutions. How do you think this pandemic is affecting the trends we've seen up to this point? Will innovation get a boost, or will the economic downturn and drop in productivity slow progress?
I think you're going to see a little bit of both. So my day job, if you will. So obviously I have my faculty job at Singularity, but my day job is I'm the chief platform officer of the largest food bank here in Ohio. My prediction is we've changed consumer behavior forever on how people attain food, right? I mean, I think the market penetration for pre-order, grab and go, or curbside delivery for your Walmarts or your Krogers, your Giant Eagles, whatever. People were starting to use it, but I wasn't seeing huge numbers from some of the things in the food industry that one might expect by now. We've just given it a giant push into everyone understanding those models. And I think by the time we leave this, a lot of people are not going to want to go back, right? They realize the convenience of it. In the food banking world is no different. We had to think about, we can't bring people to pantries for food. We have to get food out and deliver them and do drive-throughs and do home delivery and do locker systems, do all these different ways to meet the need of people. That way that they can get what they need in a safer way and keep social distance. That's created new paradigms. It's forced us into a different way to service our customer. And I think now that they've experienced it, what we're hearing is that they're not going to want to go back. So I think you're going to see whole industries like that. I do think that we've also seen times where now we kind of all realize the value of interacting socially in more experience type ways, right? Like movie theaters or social settings. So I think you will see a really quick resurgence as it makes sense, hopefully with all the health concerns.
We are seeing a move to remote work, what might more accurately be called distributed work. And what I'd like to see happen is that distributed work is proven to be a viable alternative to offices and co-location in many cases. But I'm fearful that the distributed work plans of many organizations were thrown together so hastily and that the employees have so much else to worry about, such as now handling homeschooling and dealing with the global health crisis, that people are first experiencing it under the worst possible circumstances, and that it could actually delay rather than speed up its adoption. How do you view distributed work, and how do you think the pandemic is affecting it?
I mean, I tend to agree that people need to be able to work how they can best be productive, right? And I know people, at our office who, their kids are still young enough to where they're not going to school yet. Their spouse is able to stay home with kids. Thus, they tell me, even if I allowed them to work at home, they would rather come to work because they could be more effective. I've got other people who, prefer, and maybe are not quite as social and would like to, confine themselves for larger portions of the day. Their job requires them to do coding or design, and they want that creative space to go lock themselves away, put headphones on, and just do work. I think, the COVID situation has certainly thrown us into where, it's a forced model. For many people who've never tried to work at home or organizations who were reluctant to let their people do it, they now are doing it. And I think what you'll see, though, is, I'll use non-real terms here, but let's say, if 50% of people are more effective working at home and 50% are more effective working at work, right now we went from a situation where, didn't matter which one of those in many companies you were still going to work. Now we're in a situation where it doesn't matter which one of those you are, you're still working from home. I think once we give people the choice, we'll start to see, not maybe immediately, but they'll start to work themselves out where, companies now who have the tools and technologies to allow their people to work from home effectively, like Zoom and Slack and all the ones that have now been widely adopted, will start to give that choice. And so that individual, and I'm one of them, that can be more effective by working remotely will have the opportunity to do it where they may not have had it before. But I still think the people who prefer to go to work, who prefer to socialize, who that environment or whatever working, the job that they're doing is more effectively done there, it will happen. And they'll be able to go back. So I don't think it'll be a huge paradigm shift in one way or the other. But what I like is that I think we will all find the better place for us, or I hope it will be the better place for us in the future, right? Where, I'll speak for us as an organization from a food banking perspective, right? I mean, before, a lot of this, most of the company didn't have the opportunity to, use Zoom and Slack and others. We all kind of went to work every day, and now it's an opportunity for people who, maybe are in accounting or on the design team who, can work remotely, and have a flexible schedule, or if they prefer to work in the evening versus the morning, that life balance can be better attained by, leveraging the tools and letting them choose where they work from, and not being so regimented on, we all come to work or we all stay home. People can start to work where it works best for them.
It often seems that innovation is not hindered by technological roadblocks, but by regulatory roadblocks. We've seen this previously with drones, and we're seeing it today with autonomous vehicles, and I think it's going to be a major issue in the coming years with human augmentation. Our laws and rules were not written with these technologies in mind, and regulatory bodies and governments aren't really quick to address the need for new or updated regulations, and often aren't educated enough on the technologies to do so. So as the rate of innovation increases, these barriers will become more and more apparent. Have you experienced technologies or innovations that were held back due to the lack of appropriate regulation, and how can we deal with this part of the equation?
I have yet to meet a client in any industry who doesn't tell me that regulation is a huge issue. I have financial services clients who all the regulation, banking is highly regulated, or my energy clients, energy and utilities are highly regulated. My defense clients, we're highly regulated. And so for me, I think what I've seen to be the most successful over the years is being proactive. I know that's not always possible, but I think about some of the things I've been working on here in Ohio recently that require regulation approval. We've gone and met with the regulator of that particular industry before we even started designing and building. Here's the problem, here's the current regulation. We really would like to build something in this way to better meet the needs of our customer. If we did this, would you be supportive? And it really starts to open up that dialogue much earlier. This is the same advice I give when people ask me how they deal with their lawyers. They want to be brought along, and really understand what you're trying to do. That way it saves them work on the back end of them trying, well, there's drones flying everywhere and we can't figure out the airspace now. I think if we're thoughtful about it and we bring these individuals into the conversation, as early as possible, I do tend to see that work out a lot better. Certainly there's cases where people try to do things, push things too far, and those regulators are in place for a good reason. That's just one where it's kind of just the pain that we all go through. Innovation is fun, as we all know, but at the same time, there are just some pain points we have to deal with that make it a little bit more difficult. And I think, the lawyers and the regulators are the two biggest ones I always hear. And the thing that I've always seen be the most successful is to bring them in on it. I have seen some companies go as far as literally having like an innovation council, either external or internal or a combination of, and they will bring a regulator, an actual individual from the regulatory body into their innovation council to help approve or give opinions on ideas of things that they should build, doing the same thing with their legal team. And it's highly effective because then you have the person who's going to be actually being the blocker or the approver in the room for those conversations, or find a retired person who represents that body. If you're in the financial services area and it's got tax implications, finding a prior tax authority to be able to do it. Those are things where, I think it brings that perspective into the conversation at the right time, and will make the approval process a little bit smoother. But it certainly is an issue. It blocks often. It's a pain, but that's the best advice I've seen so far.
So let's say there's a student listening, or perhaps someone interested in a career change, and they want to innovate and do work to solve humanity's grand challenges. What industries would you suggest they look into getting involved with? Or I guess another way to put it is, what industries are poised to positively disrupt the world in the coming years?
Well, that's a big one. I would say find their passion. I mean, I think you're going to be hard pressed to find any industry where it's not ripe for technology to have a really meaningful impact on where it's going. I think they're going to have to find what is the most meaningful area that really ignites their passion, and then find the ways where technology, and at least the areas I focus, can improve it. Food banking is, a many years old area, for helping those in need in our country. But I can speak from experience that, once I started to get really deeply involved in it, there was a huge amount of opportunity for me to help build products and solutions that can really more effectively help feed those in need, or even work on ones where they can upskill themselves and not get hungry in the first place. I certainly see, in days like what we're experiencing now, healthcare is a huge piece of that. But, food, areas that, people are really feeling stressors in our country around, I think are great ones to start with.
I think that's great advice. And this podcast was full of information for anyone who wants to create an organization capable of building the future. I'll make sure to put links to what we mentioned here, Singularity University, Reaching the Future Faster, the Mid-Ohio Foodbank, and of course your book, in the show notes at futuregrind.org. Nick, thanks again for joining me on the podcast.
You are very welcome. Thanks for having me, and I really enjoyed the conversation.
Hey everyone, Ryan O'Shea again, and thanks for listening to my interview with Nick. Remember to check out the show notes and more at futuregrind.org. Make sure to subscribe, leave a review, and you can also like, comment, and share to spread the word. We also need your help to keep this podcast running. You can donate at futuregrind.org/support, or make a purchase at futuregrind.org/store. And don't forget, we're offering you the opportunity to send your files and photos to the moon alongside an episode of this podcast. To find out more, go to futuregrind.org/moon. That's futuregrind.org/moon. Till next time, this is Future Grind.